Broadcasting from the Blanchistan Centre. This is Phoenix FM.
The internet is a communications tool used the world over where people can come together to bitch about movies and share pornography with one another.
According to the Nerd Index, you should be upside down in a junior high toilet around the clock.
This is Time goes in, time goes out. Never miscommunication.
It's over 9,000!
My name is Foxy.
The balls are in there.
Don't face me, bro! It's a trap! I'm a fire in my labor! Time to Hey, Charlie, wake up! Oh, God, oh, man!
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Nerd to Know Basis show, airing on Phoenix 92.5 FM and, of course, Spotify and YouTube and all those other wonderful places on the internet. I am Cian, and once again with me is Kev. Kev, how you doing?
I am doing very well, Cian. I have pried myself from the fields of Hyrule to be here tonight for you, and you should feel special.
I do feel very, very special. We will get into the new, actually, for once, accurately called Zelda game, which I don't know about if any other normies out there refer to all, like, games starring Link as Zelda games. But we will be covering the newest release along with a few anime things and a few Netflix-related things to follow up on our deep dive from last week. Before we get into that, actually, were there any, like, other Netflix announcements after last week's complete splurge of them?
Deluge. No, I think it had ended the Friday before we'd recorded. At least I haven't seen any more. Thank God. We don't need any more Netflix announcements right now. The only thing I need for Netflix to tell me is Chopper a puppet?
What?
It's One Piece. Tony Chopper's little. He's one of the main characters, and he's this little moose man that wears a hat. He's a doctor, you see, and he's one of the main characters. He's a primary cast member, and the question on everyone's lips is this going to be a CGI reindeer or is it going to be a puppet?
Well, I mean, you bring up a valid point, because I did see some discourse around the fact that before the live action Cowboy Bebop got cancelled, we got a glimpse at Ed and no one was impressed. Nothing on the actor, but like it just didn't translate into live action as well as did animation. So yes, that lack of a puppet could sink a franchise. We'll keep you posted on that. But Kev, I know how much you love talking about numbers and finances. Would you like to talk about numbers and finances in the Disney world?
Oh yeah, kid, you know I love statistics. Throw it at me. What's the hot statistical goss? Okay,
well, I said, I mentioned this before we started recording, but like two big kind of exposés. Well, one's an expose, one's more anecdotal. But the big expose that may be the last nail in the coffin of this horse that the internet is beating up is Forbes released an article about the spending on the Acolyte. And the Acolyte seemingly came to $230 million, all things considered, by the end of it. So by some estimates, it cost more than The Force Awakens to make. And like, look, I didn't hate the Acolyte, but one thing I will say, and I said this back when we covered it in the first week it came out, is it is not an expensive looking show. At times it looks quite cheap, actually. There are moments where like it looks really nice, but the characters all kind of look like they're doing their cosplay and that kind of stuff. Did you end up like ever overlapping with the Acolyte or watching any of it? Like,
no, like anything Star Wars, it completely passed me by like a ghost in the wind. But what baffles me about this, because right, there's so many things that kind of like fall into a budget that can balloon to that size. One of them is name recognition,
right?
And I don't think there was any made like A-list named actors in that show. I know there was the guy from The Good Place and the guy from Squid Game, but like, they're famous, they're popular actors, but like they wouldn't be getting, say Robert Downey Jr. Hall H numbers.
Yeah, they didn't even get Puppet Yoda
as has come out. Yeah, like remind me. So there wasn't anybody. Like I'm not missing anything. There wasn't an A-list cast member that
unless
would
you
be doing this.
count the vague notion of Darth Plagueis being in it, then no, it's what seems to now. Thankfully, the Forbes article does provide a very helpful breakdown of all the costs. But what seems to be what ended up breaking sorry, my son's here. What ends up breaking down the expenses is that I'm sorry, I'm gonna pause it there.
Sure.
But yeah, one of the things that seems to have soared the budget is they decided to film in the UK, which not entirely unusual, but it is one of the more expensive places to film. Like that's why we get loads of like filming in Ireland, or like Croatia gets a fair bit. New Zealand is like a very popular one ever since The Hobbit basically destroyed all the labor laws over there. And not only did they film in the UK, they filmed quite a lot on locations. Like, I think if it's not on a spaceship or the Jedi Temple, it's a location. So, and it's just so bizarre to me that like such small decisions have ended up costing like Disney so much money. And like you said, it's not being spent on like a Robert Downey Jr. So even with that in mind, like, where did all that money go?
I mean, like the only other thing I can think of that would balloon a budget for that size is advertising. But it is very clear that was not the case, considering this show went. Like, I think it's fair to say, a lot of Disney things have been pushed to main advertising. We talk Agatha All Along. What would be a fairly unknown project is still ending up on the sides of buses. I don't think I ever saw the Acolyte on the side of a bus.
No, I was first aware of the Acolyte when they tagged a teaser trailer for it onto the end of the Phantom Menace in cinemas, and that was not even a full cinema. So
the re-release. Yeah, sorry, I thought it was like 2000.
Not when it was 9. No, they didn't plan it out that long ago. But it's because basically, I'm no like accountant by any means, but as far as I can tell, the fact that it was filmed in the UK also means that a lot of the financials are now more easily available to be sourced. Whereas if they filmed it in like LA or something, it might be a bit more discreet. But yeah, it seems like basically, I mean, a bit like you were saying there, it seems like they spent a lot of money on pre-production before they decided what they were doing. But it's just bizarre to me because it'd be one like, in Ireland we have the scandal of like €336,000 being spent on a bike shed in the Dáil. Like, are you up on that?
Little bits. No. It's little bits because it's the Office of Public Works getting in front of the Oireachtas and the Dáil being like, just shrugging hands like, we don't know who did this.
Despite the fact that like with this, all of the accounting is readily available and you can just check. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, but I mean, go on.
It is one of these things where like normally I would be so happy for a project to get that much money to just kind of almost waste it. Like in that shooting on location in the UK to get exactly whatever that they wanted. I'd normally celebrate this. Normally, for the start being it's Star Wars and I couldn't care less. But also, like, I think it's a shame that like it flopped so hard, even though obviously they had that intention.
Yes, it is a shame. It is, and I'm just looking at the diagrams now, and like another factor in is now, I think it might be like a reverse Batgirl situation because you know how these streaming platforms, if something makes a loss or if they don't release it, they can make it a tax write-off.
Yeah.
Seemingly, they took loans to film it in the UK, and then because they did that, they then couldn't reimburse it and like couldn't do their tax loophole things. So basically all of the creative accounting went out the window on this one, which is like, it's so, I mean, look, I know money isn't the most interesting thing to talk about, and it would take like 1,000 acolytes to sink Disney. But I just find this so interesting in the way that, like you said, not a project everyone necessarily cared about somehow ended up almost like sinking the whole thing. I have the breakdown of the staff pay, and yeah, the Acolyte's staff pay is higher than anyone who worked on Andor, The Rise of Skywalker, or Solo, and more than twice what anyone was paid on The Last Jedi, Rogue One, or The Force Awakens. So something weird happened on this one. And
that's crazy.
Isn't that mad? It's just so, I mean, look, pay artists what they deserve. I'm not saying they should cut their pay or something, but it just seems like no one was really watching this one behind the scenes. And so it snuck out of control really, really quickly. And I wonder if that has anything to do with the finished product creatively as well. Because, like, you don't spend 230 million on a show that people will get on streaming functionally. I know you pay for Disney Plus, but it's free in the sense that if you have Disney Plus anyway, you get it for free.
This wasn't a show that was
one of those things that like sinks the streaming model, like, you know?
It wasn't a show that was drawing people to Disney.
Yeah, it wasn't a Stranger Things, like, you know.
Yeah, this wasn't selling subscriptions. So yeah, the crowd, like, it is really odd to, like, yeah, as you said, like, why did this show end up spending more than, like, listen, the quality of The Rise of Skywalker aside, that was the end of the mega franchise that had been building up over three movies.
Well, you surely, bring up a good point. They filmed all of Solo twice, and it still came to only just under 200 million.
Yeah, no. Like, something got mismanaged, and this show just flew under the radar, just funneling money from Disney.
It's really, really bizarre. I mean, if you're putting that much money into it, like you said, why didn't they market this thing?
Probably because they were like, there's a very good chance that they blew the marketing budget on production.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. That's true, because even the likes of Echo, which only I saw, I still saw marketed on like the digital billboards in Dublin and that kind of stuff. There was nothing for the Acolyte. I mean, if you're going to bury it that much, why not just, not that I'm saying you should, but why not backgirl it? I suppose you couldn't because maybe the UK's involved or something. But it's just such a weird, I feel like this is going to be one of those things where in 3 years' time, some YouTuber will do a 2.5-hour essay exposing some Zara Z type, exposing everything. But we don't know
right there,
now, like, you know.
And that right there, Keane, is the only way I will ever engage with this TV show. I will not watch an 8-episode TV series, but goddamn, I love a 3-hour deep dive.
I've never seen Cats. I've seen 2-hour videos about it, though.
Only 2? Those are rookie numbers. You gotta bring that up. I watched a 7-hour video on the Resident Evil franchise yesterday, Kian.
No joke. I saw a video. Now, granted, the title was probably ironic, but I saw a video that went to go up that was like 12 hours long, called A Brief Look at the Phantom Menace. You could watch it 6 times.
I mean, brief in the grand scale of the universe and time as a concept, sure.
Now, granted, that probably was a prank. Now, I didn't click on it because I don't want to encourage that kind of video. But yeah, that's peak YouTube. But before we get to Zelda, I bring this up because also Forbes published that Agatha All Along, which, you know, we covered last week. It seems to be chugging along at a good pace. Is apparently Marvel's cheapest of the Disney Plus things. We don't have as much information about the ins and outs compared to the Acolyte, but they did declare that it was cheaper to make than Echo, and Echo cost 40 million, which is apparently cheap by Marvel standards. Conversely, like She-Hulk was like 212 or something like that million, something ridiculously high that you couldn't reimburse.
Yeah, I mean,
which is so bizarre because I'm not sure if you've seen episode 3, but Agatha All Along looks better than pretty much all the other Disney Plus things so far.
Oh, certainly. Well, I mean, She-Hulk, aside from actually being, I think, the longest Marvel series to date,
that's true.
What was that, like 10 episodes? It did also have cameos from major actors from the cinematic franchise.
That's true. I didn't consider that.
That would blow the budget out a bit. Like, I reckon they're like a significant million or two probably went to Mark Ruffalo for that episode. But yeah, I mean, this goes to show, you don't need. I think we've said this with productions, like TV productions and video game productions. You don't need to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into a project for it to be good, so long as the creative intent is good.
Well, that's just it. Well, I mean, like, I think a couple of weeks ago, we sort of talked about digital effects in Marvel and that kind of stuff. And basically how you could sort of assess how a production is creatively going by how much was left to the VHX, whatever it is, special effects people. The term is falling out of my head. Because, like, green screens are an incredible tool that can be exploited. And like, if when they're making a movie, because they only have like Paul Rudd for a day or something, you just film whatever it is with the actors and the director, and you sort of let the special effects people vamp later on, the budget will balloon because that takes hours and hours of manpower. But creating a physical set, and it is pointed out in the article that part of the reason that Agatha All Along is so cheap is because they're all done on studio sets, pretty much. That takes time, it takes planning, but it is functionally cheaper. So, like, this is like a really good example of how, like, really good early on planning and creative energy throughout a whole production will really make a difference compared to. Now, I'm not saying no one was like paying attention on the Acolyte necessarily, although I think there is a case to be made based on what we said. But like that seems to me like the inverse of that, which is that they didn't really have a plan. They went in making it, and then in post-production they had to spend loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads to basically pick up all the bits that weren't planned out and made while they were making it,
Yeah, I mean, like when you leave it all in the VFX artists, what you're essentially making is a second worst looking animated movie.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it.
And then having all the pressure go on to like the small team of VFX artists who have to fill in everything, who are also being completely overworked because they have to get it by a deadline for like the Christmas release.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I mean, like, Agatha All Along costs 1/6 of the Acolyte. Wrap that around your head. How now? Because like you said, the Acolyte doesn't have stars in it. Like, it's nice.
Yeah,
it's pretty looking at times, but like, it's that money doesn't translate into enjoyment for the viewer. Like,
no, it's like it. I think I try to push this a lot of like. The idea of like, these projects, as much as a lot of them can come off as being created by, boards of committee, they'll always shine when it's being created by people, by creators.
Yeah,
and I think that's what's kind of showing with Agatha.
That's just it. You bring up an interesting point, which is, I think, like, because I know that, like, this kind of football's been kicked around with the likes of, say, Ryan Coogler doing Black Panther and all that. And I think people forget that you can make something for the likes of Disney, like a Star Wars or something like that. And yes, it is a mega franchise thing designed to make money. But that doesn't mean it can't also be an artistic pursuit with lots of creative energy in it. It can be
I mean,
both. Most things
look at
are both, you know?
look at the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. I think
Yeah,
that's a perfect
absolutely.
distillation of a single art of like a single creator's integrity that carried throughout the decades. Like
That's just it. No one cared. Like, Wanda was an established character before WandaVision, but no one really, outside of people who already liked the comics, really were invested in her journey across the films. And conversely, now we have Agatha, who is a character who, despite my wide breadth of comic collecting, is not a major figure in the Marvel universe. And they've turned her into one. And like you said with the Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a perfect example of how passion and creative energy will translate to enjoyment and passion from the viewers. And if you don't put that into your project, whether it be Moon Knight or She-Hulk or whatever, even though I like those things, then it won't translate. You can't put in one popular thing and get a result out just because they're like it's the Zack Snyder thing all over again, you know. There has to be a strong creative passion behind it, even if it's a Marvel thing, you know?
yeah. And Kian, I think this is a good pivot to what our next topic was going to be, because I don't think any other franchise has made that clearer than the Terminator franchise.
Oh, okay. You want to do that before Zelda? All right.
I think so. I think so.
All right. Fair enough. Well, then, yes, I have been eager to talk about this for 2 weeks because no one told me that they were making a Terminator anime. This is like the Acolyte again. Why does no one market these things?
Well, that's Netflix. They don't market anything. The Netflix homepage is what people think the free market is. They'll just throw anything up there, and it's up to the whims of fate for it to actually get like any traction.
Oh, that kind of sounds quite poetic when you put it like that. But yes, there is a Terminator anime now, and like I know it's like a cliche at this point to say that it's the best thing since Terminator 2, but it is. It's stunning. It's one of those like shows that not only is great on its own, but it makes all the other projects associated with it better by proxy. Like, what's your kind of... Go on, yeah?
You say all of the other ones, because the best, as you mentioned, best thing since Terminator 2, it has been a low bar since then.
I always fly the flag for the Sarah Connor Chronicles, but yeah.
I think a lot of people do, but that's definitely like the least researched one of the bunch.
That's true, but that's what I mean, because saying it's good, people go, oh, well, I mean, like, as long as it's better than the last Terminator thing, who cares? But no, this is genuinely good. And I wish I had your breadth of knowledge about anime to know who the people involved with it are. But like, it's... Well, before I get into it, like, what's your kind of association with Terminator? What's your kind of familiarity with it?
I think I have watched all of... No, I missed the last movie, but I think I've seen every other one. Because obviously I've seen 1 and 2. Classics. Great. Right. Three is bad, but I think 3 is probably the best of the sequels.
Unfortunately, yes.
Hold on, let me pull up what's the list here?
I can look. I am a
3 Rise of the
Terminator fanboy. I know all. Dara knows the video games, but apart from that, I know every scrap of Terminator stuff.
Yeah, no, I've got 3 Rise of the Machines was the one in the red leather jacket. Salvation's the Christian Bale one, and I think I have seen that movie like 3 times.
Right.
But it occupies a blank space in my mind.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you a thing that happens in that movie.
Weirdly enough, I won't dwell on it, but I actually watched Terminator. I tell a lie about what I said a second ago. Terminator Salvation's the only one I never saw. And it's conveniently the only one on Netflix apart from the anime. And I watched it, and I didn't hate it. The only reason I didn't like it is because you think Terminator, you think, fields of skulls with tanks rolling over them, atomic clouds in the sky, and like Terminator Salvation, the destroyed future is a desert with some cars in it. As a destroyed apocalyptic future, that is rubbish.
Yeah, I think that's like I think that's it. It just felt I think especially at the time it came out, because I think like 2009 was kind of the height of like the Michael Bay Transformers era.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think big, heavy, glossy CG action was just oversaturated, and it was doing absolutely nothing new.
No, no. I mean, like, it just looked, to me, it just looked really cheap. Like,
Yeah.
I'll put it this way. The way the destroyed future of 2050 looks no different than the way COVID looked a few years ago, except with a gray filter on it. Maybe they overspent on the actors or something, but that was a cheap looking movie. And say what you will about the other Terminator movies, they don't look cheap. They do look like films.
Oh yeah, but Terminator Genesis was an expensive fart.
Oh yeah, but it looks expensive. But anyway, yes, sorry, I'll get in sidetracked. So you kind of know the ins and outs of Terminator anyway, like.
Oh yeah, no, send man back in time, send robot to kill man.
Yes. And it was, and yeah, to kind of very quickly recap, I was like, who doesn't know about Terminator? But yeah, it's because Terminator 1 and 2 people love. I personally quite like Terminator 3. It's a bit camp in places, but I do think it sort of rounds out the series very nicely. And Terminator Salvation, more of a prequel than a sequel, which I was surprised by, but pleasantly so. But like the most successful and famous thing about that is Christian Bale yelling at a cameraman. So
yeah,
as your legacy, not great. And then there's a TV show that only I saw, and then Terminator just kind of goes away for a while. Then they reboot it with Terminator Genesis, which overwrites the original Terminator and Terminator 2. What's the thing from Dodgeball? A gutsy move. Let's see if it plays out. Didn't.
that's the Emilia Clarke one where old Arnie shows up around Terminator 1.
Yes.
And also Matt Smith is an AI. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah. I mean, God bless Emilia Clarke. I actually have a huge ton of respect for her as an actor, but she's got some bad projects under her belt, unfortunately. And I think Captain Boomerang was in it. It's another in the Matt Smith can't get a break in films. Of that list is growing worryingly large.
Actually, I tell you this, Terminator Genesis is a movie I saw because me and a friend of mine just wanted to go see something in IMAX because IMAX at the time was novel and it was the only thing playing.
Oh, God bless. Then Dark Fate, I won't like spoil it for you in case you want to see it, but yeah, it's the first half of Dark Fate is okay. And then it sort of goes off the rails. It's what I call a noble failure, I suppose. It tries to kind of get back to the roots of it because Sarah Connor is in it. They've got a Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, but it sort of runs out of ideas very quickly. But anyway, I bring all that up because the anime now, Terminator Zero, I believe, because I don't know the names, it always pops up in the Japanese. It does the I can't believe no one thought of this decision of doing Terminator without John Connor in it. Do you know anything about this anime? Just so I'm not like kind of like.
I think I know bits. Do you know what? I watched the Mother's Basement video on it. So
okay.
I think I watched the gist of it because it's basically because it's Terminator in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, in 1997 Japan.
Yeah, which like again, like I think, especially for like these kind of 80s. Like these 80s kind of monster franchises. We saw this with Prey, where it's the novel concept of what if we take this thing everybody knows and put it somewhere else in the world?
Yes.
And it took them 30 years to figure that
out. What a novel idea. Yeah, so like yes, you're absolutely right. It's basically your usual thing. A Terminator is sent back to stop someone from doing a thing. A human is sent back to stop a Terminator. But a couple of things they changed, though. Firstly, no John Connor. Good move. I think that, like, the problem with kind of lionizing John Connor is it works for one movie, stretches a bit into two, and then it's just ridiculous the longer it goes on.
At this point,
it's
he is just Jesus Christ.
yeah. Like that'd be fine if we never saw a John Connor figure. But yeah, it's ridiculous like how like tied to him it is. So that was a good move. Setting it in like a 1997 Japan, but not like our real world Japan. They sort of have the Amobi robots moving around. Really cool. And I think the winning ingredient is, without giving too much away, we have a character, I believe he's called Malcolm, who's having nightmares about the future, which are very much, the things we're familiar with, you know, playgrounds set on fire, all that kind of stuff. And he has the specific date that Judgment Day is going to happen, that Skynet's going to go do its thing. And he has created an alternate AI that may stop Skynet. And he basically is hesitant about releasing it because, being a Terminator movie, what if this AI is the AI that causes the end of the world? So huge portions of this are just him trying to decide whether he should release this technology on the world, knowing what Skynet does, and B, trying to convince the AI called Kokoro, and surprisingly voiced by Rosario Dawson in the English, which I didn't know. But anyway, and B, trying to convince the AI Kokoro that if he does, humanity is worth protecting. And to make this even more ambiguous, they don't flatly say what the Terminator and the humans' goals are. So for all you know, the Terminator could be going back to make sure he turns it on, or kill him before he does, and ditto for the human. So there's a real tension and ambiguity to it. Like, we're so used to the Terminator tropes, like send a Terminator, send another Terminator or person, protect John Connor, get away, that it was really, really refreshing going into this, not knowing where everyone stood, and because the location is so different, not knowing how, like, I binged all 8 episodes. I never do that. So it was really, really nice to be excited by a franchise that was something so familiar,
Yeah, like it just sounds like just a fresh take on, especially something that I think everyone had agreed had just really stagnated over the past 20 years.
Because you're absolutely right. And like the thing about Terminator is like, how we always say, and everyone says, like, episode 7 is just a remake of episode 4 and like all these kind of things. But Terminator is the worst victim of that, because Terminator 1 was not built as a roadmap for a franchise. It was just a movie, like Back to the Future or something like that. There is no reason why creatively you have to keep going back to that specific well. I mean, like, Star Wars gets a lot of flack for redoing the Death Star law, but by my count, they've only done that 4 times in 11 films. Terminator is pretty, if movie-wise, is stuck in the story they set up in movie 1, even the good ones,
And here's the thing. Well, I mean, you say that. I think one of the defining things about Terminator is how it, like, I think something that the sequels don't get is that the jump from 1 and 2, because James Cameron did make the first one. I'm right in that. I'm like, yeah.
Yes,
so, like,
yes, he did 1 and 2, yeah.
Yeah. Like, James Cameron flipped the script on 2 because 1 is a horror movie. 2 is a big blockbuster action.
Yeah.
Still bones the movie.
You're right.
Like,
and it's I think we covered this a few weeks ago. It's a shame that like Terminator didn't go down the Alien route, because because Alien is a franchise that has basically done the same thing over and over again. Not always successfully, but like every director has basically put their stamp on the material. It feels like everyone who's taken a crack at Terminator has basically been trying to do the James Cameron stuff while also copying his story without adding to it, like,
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's not for lack of talent getting involved in the Terminator franchise. I mean, the Christian Bale one was done by McGee, and the Dark Fate was Tim Miller, who, made Deadpool.
Oh, he gave up Sonic for it, yeah.
Yeah, no, like, so, like, that's, again, it's not lack of talent, but every time a director gets their hands on it, They just seem stuck in the rut of trying to recreate those first two movies.
That's just it, yeah. And so that's why this one felt really refreshing. And it's just like, maybe it's just I just watched too much like, Marvel-y type stuff. But it was just nice to be challenged by something. Like, this is a dark, violent show. And on top of the ambiguity of not knowing like where our characters are at and what they believe and that kind of stuff, like there is also quite a lot of like mistreatment of technology in this. Like a running subplot is the main character has 3 kids who inevitably are going to be, targeted by the Terminator and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in the start of it, their babysitter gifts the girl in the family like a sort of a robot cat, like a Furby type thing. And she wants to take care of it like a real animal. And the oldest boy grabs a screwdriver and wants to take it apart to see how it works. And that's a running theme throughout the whole series. And like at the same time as that, you have all these like like kind of iRobot style amiibo slaves who like, are just doing their jobs and sort of like packing shelves, and people hit them for no reason. Like you see them walking dogs and like causing traffic accidents and all that. So like you do sort of find yourself projecting onto machines not why Skynet does what it does necessarily, but that basically the AI Kokoro sort of has a point of, well, why does humanity deserve to be saved? If we are a sentient being, why should we protect you? So it's like, I never considered Terminator a heady franchise, but I'm really glad someone took it there because that always has been an ingredient in it. Like,
Yeah, no, it definitely, it just needed, like that, it needed some thoughtfulness. Sorry, you're just describing this, and I'm just getting completely flashed back to a show, to an anime I watched a couple of years ago that, I mean, certainly takes influence from Terminator, but sounds a lot like a lot of the themes getting covered in this. It's an anime called Vivi Fluoride Eye's Song.
Okay.
And it's the whole thing. It's very Terminator. In robot apocalypse happens, scientists creates an AI, sends that AI back in time, well before the robot apocalypse.
Right.
And obviously it's an anime, so she takes the form of a blue-haired idol girl.
Yeah. Of course. No other options.
She is sent back to awaken at distinct points in a timeline to try and stop the robot apocalypse. So
right.
Every episode is her waking up, being briefed by like her companion AI. And then you just like, as the series goes, you just see this world evolve like technologically and societally. Like she'll like, first episode should be in like kind of a fairly modern society like us. By episode 3, there's hotels in space. She'll have jumped centuries.
Oh, this
and then the
awesome.
Entire series is like kind of just jumping from those points to points. Again, like now that I'm saying it, it is recursively a series that is definitely based on Terminator. But I suspect that the creators of Terminator Zero probably took some influence from this.
I'd love to look it up now. Give us the name of that again there.
Vivi Fluoride Eye's Song.
Okay.
If you just look up, it might be on Crunchyroll. I think Vivy.
Right, like the Black Mage. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one more thing that kind of, like I said, this sort of elevates the other Terminator-y things. Because the thing about Terminator is that it retconned itself twice in the space of like 5 years between Genesis and Dark Fate, and will be again, inevitably. But there's a lovely motif from the future, which is that they have sort of a seer woman, like, sort of a sage, who basically explains how time travel works to them and all that kind of stuff. And she says a line I can't say at 5, but basically the human asks her, is it my fate to go back and do this? And she goes, there's no fate. That's the effing point. And basically she does about episode 5, I think, she basically explains how time travel works in Terminator, which is that to take a long story short and not like kind of give away, because I encourage you to watch it. She basically explains before this woman goes back in time that when she goes back, she is not saving them. when she goes back and changes something, she will change her own future, but that's parallel now. And everyone here in the destroyed future of 20 whatever, they're stuck. There is nothing they can do about it. She is functionally going to save people she doesn't know and will never know. This isn't like a closed time loop thing. Every time the Terminator or her muck about with time, that's another world created, which good. I don't want to reconcile Sarah Connor Chronicles with Genesis, with this, with that, with the other. And they do imply that this is the 20th time that someone has sent back a Terminator and a human, or a Terminator and a Terminator. So, like, they are so far deep in their time travel war that they are sort of jaded by it. They even imply that when a Terminator goes back, they basically have a window of 2 or 3 hours where they can send someone. Otherwise, that reality just obliterates itself and there's nothing they can do. So they're starting to put, like, I'm not saying more rules equals better, but I'm saying that, like, they're making the likes of Genesis and stuff make more sense and make them more sensational. Because if you, I'm not sure if you've ever made a creative project, Kev, where it's like the 20th time you've taken a crack at it, you are so far removed from where you started that it's not really the same thing anymore. And that is sort of in a meta way what Terminator is. People have redone it so many times that what worked about the first one isn't there. So putting that in the language of the show was really savvy, like, in a way, isn't it? Like,
damn, that's beautiful.
Isn't it though?
Yeah,
and this
no,
is a violent, like,
that's
anime,
yeah.
You know, a spin-off that no one's heard of.
Yeah, no, like it sounds like it's actually trying something different. Yeah, no, I'll have to give that a shout. It looks really, really cool.
And it's and it's real pretty, I should say, and the music's great. It's
I looked it up there.
Really
it was
notch.
I looked it up there. I had a glance at the production team. It looks like the studio that animated was Production IG, who are they're the Ghost in the Shell studio.
I was getting Ghost in the Shell vibes off it, but I just thought that was because I was being basic, because it's like a robot thing, you know?
Well, I suppose while we've still got time, if we want to talk about a franchise that has tried to bend over backwards in reconciling its own fractured, split timelines.
Oh, that's the best segue we've had yet.
Cian, do you know about this new Zelda?
Because, like, Zelda is the franchise I have never been good at, but I know other people love. I know this is the first time that Zelda is actually the playable character, right?
Yeah, it's they decide, because I think as well, like, it's probably a good idea to kind of like frame where we are at, because Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were such huge dynamic shifts into what, like, the framework of a Zelda game is. And I talked at length about how Tears of the Kingdom, just in terms of pure game design, kind of flipped the script in its kind of creator mode, being able to kind of like move and interact with anything in the world. Like, you could climb anything, build anything, move anything, and jump through the roof of any cave. Like, like every part of that game was kind of designed for you to kind of bend it over backwards. And so the fact that we got a new Zelda game so soon, and that in this one, like, the after like such a titanic shift of that, within 2 years we have a new Zelda game, and also, hey, this is one where you actually play as Princess Zelda. I think that's really cool. I think that shows that the franchise, that they're doing something extremely cool and interesting with this franchise. But here's what's fun about this, right? Zelda isn't just a skin swap for Link in this. As opposed to, you know, for as well, like, for the record, this is a more classical top-down Link to the Past style Zelda.
Well, that's just it. The animation is very spritey, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's the same animation style they did for the Link's Awakening remake they did a couple of years ago. Which, it's gorgeous. Like, it's really cartoony, really fun, really vibrant. So if they continue making these sorts of like classic Link to the Past styles, I think this is probably their go-to standard now. But what's fun, yeah, no, Zelda has a kind of a completely like different sort of like power set to Link. But it's also adapting that sort of do anything, move anything ethos from Tears of the Kingdom. Because the main gimmick of this is that Zelda, she's a magic user who can basically scan various items and things in the environment and then summon echoes of them. And use that for combat. Like, so she doesn't have like a weapon herself. She has later on in the game, she has a sword that you can summon for a limited time. But your main source of like combat is by scanning the enemies in the environment and summoning them to fight for you.
How very Persona.
Yeah. So like you'll just kind of like scan a bunch of like bokoblins and then suddenly have like 5. By the time you get to a certain point of the game, you can summon 5 bokoblins just to run up on this one like octopus.
Okay,
because you go and like beat down the grass and like collect whatever treasure's there.
Because like I'm not up on my Zelda, but I'm genuinely flabbergasted that there aren't more games that have like given her the spotlight by now, considering she's the title character, you know? Like, it's not like a Princess Peach situation. And even then, there's been lots more opportunities to play as her than in other things, like, you know. So, like, I'm surprised that this was a big innovation in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't say why they took this long. And especially, like, Zelda has always been a very dynamic character. Like, I alluded to it earlier, you know, the Zelda timeline, which is just, it's farcical. But the what's cool about Zelda is that, like, every few games are a completely wildly different, like, tonal shift. From, you know, Ocarina of Time's very classical fantasy to Wind Waker's very cartoony style to, like, Twilight Princess's, like, dark, grim style. All of them have their own kind of tonal aspects. Obviously, you know, the world and Link have their own tonal aspects in that, but Zelda, like, where Link is very much a blank slate you, the player, could put into them. Zelda's kind of the driving force character. And there's been, you know, there was about a dozen different interpretations of Zelda throughout all of these. So, you know, it's interesting that, like, she hasn't been, like, a playable character. But that doesn't mean they haven't done anything with Zelda over the past few decades.
No,
They've done
like
plenty.
But that's what I mean, though. I know she's a dynamic character. That's why I'm surprised that, like, there hasn't been like like even in Crash Bandicoot, I know it's a completely different series. You could swap between Crash and the sister, even something like that. There hasn't been really like chances to put her in the limelight, like.
No, I can't say why. I mean, like they've had plenty of opportunity, but we just haven't. And instead, we've gotten, you know, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild and whatnot. But with what they're doing with her now is incredibly interesting. And I think back then, if we did get her, we would have probably just gotten she's Link with a skirt.
You know, I was gonna keep this discreet, but for the last 5 minutes, my son has been hitting me with a accurate scale Moana or prop. And I have been creatively muting the microphone, but just there, he lifted it so high that he fell backwards. God bless him. So I've just popped him down there now.
That's a paddling.
Talking about Zelda, that's a paddling.
That's a paddling.
Paddling down the Hyrule River. Oh, you bet. That's paddling.
But no, to speak of it more, so like what's really cool then is, much like with Tears of the Kingdom, this ability to kind of create, like, the first thing the trailer, like the first trailer showed you was you can make a bed. Not only can you make a bed, you can make like 4 beds in a row.
Right. And
you can then stack those beds on top of each other to create a staircase. And that is how you will escalate mountains.
Okay, well then that was going to be my next question. So I know you've got a summoning like mechanic, but is this still functionally like a Zelda game where you're traveling across the world and like there's
you go to different regions
and all that kind of stuff, like.
Yeah, you go to different regions, you help the boss of said region. There's full-fledged like classical Zelda style dungeons, which is cool because that's something that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were actually lacking themselves with their more open-ended design. So that's a real kind of return to form in this spin on it. But it's also incorporated a lot of the side quest things that those games had introduced. And then it has the Light World, Dark World thing that like all of this like Link to the Past style game have had themselves. And then it's fun in the characterization because, as I said, every Zelda game, barring direct sequels, are kind of their own canon. And in this one, Link's like the whole game starts with Link saving you from Ganon, and then you escaping and Link getting captured.
Right.
But the funny twist on it is that you have no idea who Link is.
Oh. So
this guy
like
shows up,
time, but backwards. Interesting.
Yeah, this guy shows up, breaks you out of crystal, gets captured, and you get his cloak. And you go to the first village, and people are like, "Why are you wearing a cloak?" And your first question is, "Who's Link?"
Now that's a good twist. Okay. All right.
And so obviously we know who Link is, but like, it's so fun watching people around you be like, "Well, Link's this cool swordsman. Obviously, like he saved me from this guy." Like it adds a history in the context of this world.
Well,
that I think is just really colorful.
Well, see, that's a really good point in itself because, like, not to bring Doctor Who into this for too long, but basically, one of the head writers, Stephen Moffat, has basically gone on record as saying the best way to put the Doctor at the center of a story is actually to take him out of it and examine the hole that is left by his absence. And it sounds like that's what's going on here. We actually get to know Link as a character by not being Link for a little while.
When Poochie's not on screen, everybody has to be asking, "Where's Poochie?"
And why have you got his cape? Yes.
Exactly. But yeah, no, like it's truly like it is. I think I haven't got the greatest affinity for this style of Zelda, the top-down adventure one. I think I would be much more comfortable in the realm of your Tears, of your Breath of the Wild, of your Majora's Mask, your 3D style. But I have been so utterly gripped by this one because of how it brings in design elements from everything previously in a way that I think like it gives you so many options. And like, because it's very puzzle oriented as well. But because you can, like, as I said, you can summon a bed in a cave as a raft to float down the river, you're like, it makes you feel smart for solving the puzzle in the way it was probably meant to be solved. But because it just kind of opens that up for you, it gives you this huge toolbox. It's very satisfying.
Okay, you're talking me into this now because, like, I'm not good at open world games, but I was having a look at the stills there on Google, and like the top-down style, it looks a bit like Animal Crossing. I could be drawn into that. That looks really engaging.
I think so. I think it's not quite as like go anywhere, do anything as Breath of the Wild, if that would intimidate you.
Yeah,
but like, because it's a fairly enclosed map. It kind of dictates where you can go at a given time, but it still gives you room to explore the zones you have.
And
I'm
yeah, go on.
No, I'm really taken by it. I think it is taking a lot of willpower for me to not pick it up right now as we're recording and tick away through the dungeon I'm in, because it's just kind of it's also like it's the perfect Switch game. And by that I mean like it's something I can have on the main TV, like sit there playing like a normal game. But it's also like when you're not doing main story content, it is so easy to have like a YouTube video in the background while you're sitting handling. I just kind of like, just take it away. The puzzles are never that difficult where you can't solve them while watching a 12-hour Phantom Menace video.
Oh yeah, give that a plug. Another plug, I should say. Okay.
Well, to my own chagrin now, I will get a chance to play it again because unfortunately we are out of time.
Once again, the NES has been thrown by the wayside, and I had so many good apocalyptic games, which we'll save for next week or the week after that or the week after that.
And
Eventually.
again and again and again and again.
All right, but thank you for joining us on our non-John Connor involved Terminator and our non-Link involved Zelda and our non-budget controlled Disney Plus shows.
All the main characters are missing.
Oh yeah, no Skywalkers in our Jedi show. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Or no Obi-Wan.
No Wanda's in our WandaVision.
There you go. Very, very good. Well, thank you for joining us on our journey through ongoing franchises that are missing their main component with mixed results. If you've enjoyed this, there are plenty of more episodes going up on YouTube every single day. But until then, I've been Cian.
I've been Kev.
And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to a Nerd to Know Media production.